Sanson, Jonas, and Christina Ortiz with Veterans in Politics. We have live, all the way from Cleveland, Danny Tarkanian, congressional candidate for District Number 3. Danny, how you doing today?
Very tired.
All right. Tell us a little bit about you.
My campaign, or the trip?
You in general.
Well, look, one of the things that distinguishes myself against most people running for office here in Southern Nevada is I've lived here most of my life, over 35 years, and my family has been very blessed with what this community has given it. Hopefully the community feels that my family has given a lot back to it also. But we understand the importance of public service, from my father as a basketball coach and all the things that he did outside of it to the things my mother has done and as a public servant on the school board and now the city council, to all the different charities my wife and I have been involved in, from the Tark Toy Drive, the Team Focus, Hope for Prisoners programs. We understand the importance of giving back to the community, and I'm taking the next step, and I think the most important step is to get back to Washington, D.C., get rid of the establishment people that have lined their own pockets and took care of the people that are keeping them in office with their campaign donations. And I'll go back there and fight for them and be their voice. And one thing most people that know me will tell you is I'm a fighter. I've been knocked down quite often. I've had quite a few adversities, but I keep coming back tougher than ever.
Could you give us the boundary lines for Congressional District 3?
Yeah, it's basically everything north of Summerlin Parkway and west of Durango until you get to Russell. And then once you get to Russell, we have everything up and down the state, so east and west.
So why do you want to be in public office so bad?
A little bit what I just said. I think it's important to give back to your community as part of what you do in your life. Look, when it's all over and done, what do you want to be remembered for? What do you want to be able to say, I accomplished? So you walk away and you pass away with $1 billion. What is that going to do for you? What did it do for people while you were here? So you walked away with this power and of running a big corporation or what else there is. But you know what? You can really make a difference in a legacy that will have a lasting effect, one that your kids can be proud of, is if you go back to in public service, whether it's at a local level, state level, or in Washington, D.C., and you really do things that have a great impact for the people you're representing and have a major influence on their lives. And you do it for them, not for yourself or, as I mentioned, all the special interest groups. To me, I hope that my kids, when I get older and I'm getting ready to take my last breath, they feel the pride of what I accomplished in my life that I felt for my father when he took his last breath.
So let's say we hope you get elected. You are endorsed by Veterans in Politics. So let's say that you get elected. What's the first thing you plan on doing?
I'm going to take my kids on a drive across the country all the way to Washington, D.C. and find a home and put them up in there. I assume you're asking what am I going to do when I get there. Look, the thing is, I'm not naive to think that I'm one of 435 congressional people in one house of a body of politics, that I'm going to be able to get anything done myself. But I can tell you that I'm going to go back there with certain principles that I'm going to fight for and not let up on. And I think that our government is too big. It's over-expansive. It's infringing upon the sacred individual rights and freedoms that our Constitution has given us. And every administration, Republican and Democrat, has expanded that size of government, taken away more of our freedoms. At some point, we need to fight back and get that changed in reverse. And I'll be that voice. I think we spend way too much money. How can we have a society, a government that represents society, and think it's okay to put our country in a $19 trillion debt, and it's going up almost $1 trillion. It has gone up $1 trillion a year under Obama. What are we doing to our kids, and the future of those kids, and what's going to happen to our monetary system? We need somebody back in there that's going to fight to reduce the deficit. And the thing that I've talked about previously, one of the worst things I see in our government is all the special tax breaks and credits and regulations that are passed just to benefit certain special interest groups, ones that are so powerful out there that we're passing things that make them exempt, and the rest of the individuals that aren't. And I'm going to give you a good example, and it's one that I have a hard time figuring out how it ever happened and why it hasn't been changed. And that's what the so-called inversions that we're doing with corporations. You have these big corporations like General Electric, one of the most profitable companies in the world for many, many years. They never paid any federal income taxes. What they do is they put their money overseas in one of some fake subsidiary that they create in a country that has a very low, if any, corporate tax rate, and they hold the money overseas. And then when they get so much money, they petition the U.S. government. They say, hey, let us bring it back. We'll create more jobs and improve our businesses if if you just let us bring us back for, one time forgiveness sake. Well, what about those hardworking corporations here in the rest of the country that don't have the resources to hide their money overseas, and they're paying the world's highest corporate tax rate, 37%. We're forcing those companies to pay the highest tax rate ever, and we're allowing the bigger companies not to pay any or very little through these inversions. And I think it's completely unfair. It's something that should be changed immediately, and I think would have a substantial benefit for our country as a whole.
Every time you turn on the news now, it looks like terrorism is going rampant. What's your plan to protect Americans here in the United States?
One of the most important, if not the most important function of the federal government is to the welfare and security of the citizens of this country, and that's where our resources should be placed. We spend so much money in other areas that the federal government shouldn't be involved in, but we should be fully funding whatever it takes to stop terrorism. And as many people on the right say, we need to take the fight to them because they're taking it to us right now. We're dilly-dallying around, for lack of a better phrase, in Syria and Iraq, and when we should have took them out a while ago. What I would have done if I was president, obviously, that's your
next step. Huh?
Yeah, my next step. It's easy for me to say, is what I'm trying to say, as opposed to someone who's sitting in those shoes. But you hate to. But one of the things that's so obvious is you had the ISIS take down a Russian jet. You had ISIS go into France and commit that really horrendous atrocities and killed all the people there. You had England come out and say, we'll do whatever it takes to get rid of ISIS. Then we had the San Bernardino killings here in the United States. We could have got the world's most powerful elite legions together, and all of our countries combined could have went into Iraq and Syria and just wiped out ISIS. It probably would have took a couple of weeks, maybe a month at the most. You could have had every major country in there willing to do it. But Obama, one, he didn't reach out to him. Two, they probably wouldn't listen to him because I don't think they like him or they trust him or they have faith in him. And instead, what we did was, we upped some more bombings, so we were keeping them in the sky and bombing people. So it's allowed them to send out their terrorist cells to all the different parts of the world. And they've said they have all these terrorist cells in Europe. They have them here in the United States. I will tell you, my mom's a city councilwoman here in Las Vegas, and she's been briefed by Homeland Security, and they've told her they believe there's ISIS terrorist cells here in Clark County, which makes us very, very scared, particularly with the amount of tourism that come into the country, into Las Vegas every day. So we allowed them to expand in other areas of the world, and they're taking the fight to us, so we should be taking the fight to them. And I would be a big proponent of that. But I'm not a proponent to do it alone. I'm a proponent to get all the other countries involved that all these things are happening to also.
Jim? Hey, Danny, one of the things that when we were talking a little bit before we came on air was one of the things that you said is sometimes gets thrown out, perennial candidate. Well, and I'm going to kind of answer the question for you and my take on it. And I've heard that about you before. But just so the listeners know, so this is full disclosure, they can call you a perennial candidate if they want. But the Danny Tarkanian that I know I ran for Assembly District 8 against Barbara Buckley. Everybody knew there was no way in the world I could win that. Yeah. But I had a fundraiser, and you showed up. And to me, that just spoke a lot about your character. So one of the things when they bring up perennial candidate, I'm like, but you got to understand, perennial candidate means they'll just run for any office, no matter what. If you look at the offices that you've ran for, none of those were going to be easy races. Every single one of them was tough, so I think it speaks to your character that you're willing to challenge tough opponents because you know what's right. I mean, you won the primary. Congratulations. Michael Roberson was not an easy person to defeat in the primary, and you did it. So what's your plans to win the general?
Well, let me answer the first part a little bit more so we can put those races I was in perspective, since we want to bring them up. It's not only a perennial candidate. It's not just somebody who run for any office. It's usually somebody who runs and they get beat substantially, and they're not a factor in any race. Every race I was in, first of all, I won 4 out of my 5 Republican primaries. This is my 5th one I'm in. So I've beat some tough people. I beat the former Clark County Republican chair, Brian Scroggins, who had every endorsement of every elected official in the state, and I beat him in 2006. I beat the most popular state senator in Nevada in 2012, and Barbara Sagaski in a tough primary. And then I beat the majority leader in the U.S. State Senate, who's endorsed by every major elected official except Joe Heck, and outspends me 4-1. and has the ability to raise as much money as he wants because of his position. I won all those primaries. Then every one of my general elections, I made up at least 6.5% or more of the voter registration deficiency. You say that these races were tough. They were big races. Not only that, they were in horrible districts. In 2004, I ran for the state senate against the incumbent state senator in a district that was 18.5% more Democrats. That Bush lost by 20% in the presidential election. I lost by 7%. I substantially outperformed Bush. I don't know how anybody could say that's not a great accomplishment. I ran in 2006 against the former governor's son, who outraised me 4-1 in the state senate. And the governor's son was the governor was very popular. And quite honestly, that's the one race I probably shouldn't have ran in, but I was already in the race and he got in the race. It's tough to beat any Ross Miller and Bob Miller's the governor's son. Now Adam Laxalt beat him by 0.5% of the biggest Republican sweep ever in the last election, and as good a candidate as Laxalt is, with as much money as Laxalt had, he almost lost in the 1 year that every Republican won. In 2012, I lost, as I mentioned, I won the primary and lost to the first black U.S. congressman in the country's history on the same time that a black president is running for re-election in a district that had the highest African-American percentage of any district in the state. And the district was 14.5% more Democrats. I lost by 8. So I made up 6.5% in that. And again, as there was few people outside of the hardcore Republicans who would have thought that I was going to beat Roberson. I just didn't beat him. I beat him good. And so I when people can say what they want about perennial candidates, it doesn't bother me. And I won't remember the quote, but one of my favorite quotes is the one by Teddy Roosevelt when he starts talking about being in the arena. It's not the fact. It's the fact that you're in there, you fight, and you're bloodied, and you get back up, and you come back and fight again that is a sign of a man. It's not the fact that you've had some defeats. I've been very blessed to be involved in a competitive environment my whole life because my dad was a basketball coach. I saw him lose some very disappointing losses. A little bit like what I've done. He had Long Beach State, which was a state school that had never had a winning season before he got there, and took UCLA during their 10-year run of NCAA championships and lost to them by 2, the closest game UCLA ever had in the playoffs. Would they call my dad a loser after that game? He came here and took UNLV's program, and in his 4th year lost to North Carolina with 4 Olympians and the Olympic coach, Dean Smith, and they lost to them by 1 point, I believe. I don't think anyone would call him a loser. And I took some tough races and I lost some tough races, but those are all temporary setbacks. You don't lose until you quit trying, and I haven't quit trying.
Danny, I've known you most of my life, and I've been very blessed to do so. And I know you, and I'm very happy to live in your district. But for
I'm happy to have you there, believe me.
For the listeners
Are you going to vote for him?
He already knows the answer. But for the listeners out there, what is one thing that you can say, like if you really wanted to gun it in their home, that sets you apart from your competitor?
There's a clear distinction in this race. Listen, I am going back to Washington, D.C. because I see what's happened with our career politicians and how they're destroying our country because of their self-interest and wanting to preserve their power and position. And you see this in the presidential nominee for the Democrat Party. She will lie to the public. She will, in most people's eyes, commit crimes that put our nation at risk just so she could move forward in her quest to become president. My opponent, so I'm running because I want to shake the establishment up. And as I say, I think it's time we send a true rebel to Washington, D.C. to shake things up. She's a complete opposite. She was Harry Reid's 6th choice at best to run for this seat. Harry Reid has anointed her now as a candidate. She stated on her one appearance to the Senior Center that Shelley Berkeley and Harry Reid are grooming her to take over their spot. She's going to be the same. If you liked what Harry Reid did for this state over the 30-plus years he's been in Washington, D.C., you're going to vote for Jackie Rosen because she's the chosen one of Harry Reid.
Danny, tell us a little bit about the convention. You were out there for a few days.
Yeah, I went out there. I only saw the last 2.5 days. I got there late on Tuesday night. And I just thought those are things that you don't experience much of a lifetime. There's incredible experiences, just excitement, enthusiasm. I've been to 4 Final Fours in basketball, been to some great sport events. Nothing compares to the excitement and emotions in a convention. And this past week is good, if not better than any I've seen. And I think the party as a whole is much more united than the country, the liberal media wants you to believe. There are some people that obviously aren't going to jump on the Trump bandwagon, at least not to this point. But there's a vast majority of others that say, hey, we got to get Trump elected. The last thing we can do is put someone such as Hillary Clinton in the White House for another 4 to 8 years. And I think you see that party coming together. The one thing I was disappointed in, and you guys discussed this earlier, is how a guy who's a governor of the state, John Kasich, who promises to support whoever the nominee is, and then you lose, you don't even show up to the convention. And worse than that, you have another person who runs for the presidency in Ted Cruz, who also signs the document saying he'll support whoever the nominee is, and then he loses, and then he comes to the convention and won't endorse the candidate. To me, my dad always taught me, you win with class, lose with dignity. Now, I've been very dignified on my 4 races, and Tom, I get a little classy, but those two candidates need to get some class, because all they did was hurt the party and violate their bond. And I thought that was wrong. I thought Trump gave a great speech. It was a long speech, but I don't think anybody got tired. At least people that care about our country got tired of listening to him. He talked about the problems we're facing and how we're going to change those problems. I think we're moving in the right direction with him as a candidate now, and I look forward to him being victorious and me helping, me working in Congress to fight for some of those things he talked about.
Well, Danny, I want to thank you for showing up to this program, because I know you went from airport to here, right? That's about right.
Oh my goodness, it's been I have not slept in 2 days except on the plane. I've been traveling for, I think it's been close to 18 hours, but it was hard to get back from Cleveland.
So you're an awesome athlete, so aren't you used to
I'm an old washed-up athlete at this point.
So what would you want to tell the listeners why they should go to the polls and vote for you?
You're going to have a simple choice. You're going to have somebody who was chosen to be their replacement in Washington, D.C. Harry Reid has chosen Jackie Rosen to replace him and to run and vote on the policies he voted on. I'm going to go back to Washington, D.C., and I'm going to be a true rebel. I'm going to fight the establishment and do what's best for my constituents. I'm going to be a voice for my constituents. Look, if people can criticize me losing some elections, nobody can criticize the fight that I have in me or the determination and perseverance that I've shown.
Could we have your point of contact?
My campaign website,
phone number.
Well, I don't know my campaign phone number. I know my personal cell. I'll probably keep that to myself. But the website's TARK, TARK 4FOR Congress. So TARK4Congress.com.
And do you have any events coming up that we can probably attend or cash?
Well, we don't at this time. We're just right now getting our staff hired for the general election. We've expanded what we've had in the past. We're building our outreach, grassroots outreach. We have somebody out here who's going to start working on volunteers. We'll start putting some events together after the 2 conventions and the Olympics. Right now, most of the people are concerned about the conventions, and then the Olympics are coming up, so there's going to be a little hard to get their attention. Right now, I got to be on the phone raising money. I got to build my infrastructure and be ready to take off in the middle of August.
Well, Danny, thank you so much for coming on the program. We really appreciate it. That's Danny Tarkanian, congressional candidate for District Number 3. This